Well, hey AP Biology, I hope you're doing well when you get this. I'm sorry I've been out. My family's been sick. We're still trying to recover. I wanted to cover this chapter one with you. I know Miss Hartill's been leading you in chapter one, chapter two, which is amazing. But I still wanted to cover chapter one with you. I know I gave you those guided notes, and if this helps you at all, it would be well worth it. Have to excuse me, my voice is a little shot, but I'm gonna try my best. Again, hope you're doing well. I miss seeing you. Um, yeah, so let's go ahead and get started. So chapter one, we talked about, a view of life, and we looked at this picture and tried to investigate, what about this picture illustrates biology, illustrates life. And so, we talked about our big idea mini project. I would love to still hear those from you eventually. But biology, yeah, biology is life, okay? And we already discussed some of this, so I'm going to go a little quickly through what we've discussed in class. But biology, of course, is the study of life. There's great diversity, but living things are composed of the same chemical elements as non-living things. And so we obey the same physical and chemical laws that govern everything else in the universe. So life is within, God's creation. And so there's such diversity. Of course, you see bacteria, paramecium, sunflowers, but all of life shares similar characteristics. And so we discussed this. So is an apple alive? And some of y'all had some great responses with this. Some of you said, well, if it's detached from the tree, it's not alive. I mean, if you cut off your arm, is your arm alive if it's detached from the body? But then we discussed that an apple does, age. It does develop. It can reproduce. And so it's a fun little discussion to have. And so we talked about life has 7 general properties. There's order to life. We have to obtain and materials, energy. Evolutionary adaptation, we adapt, we evolve, species as a whole do, populations. Of course, we grow and develop. You're still growing and developing. Our brains are constantly remolding themselves. We respond to the environment. I see a lot of jackets around NCS because I guess some of the rooms are pretty cold, but we respond to the environment. We regulate. We maintain homeostasis. And of course, as a species, we reproduce. And so, of course, viruses, we discussed how viruses, and there's our foe and hated enemy, but viruses are not alive. They can't reproduce without a host. And so we discussed that as well. So life shares common characteristics. And so common descent is an evolutionary term. We all came from the same place. We will talk about evolution and lie of God's word down the road. But in the meantime, just kind of know whenever you see common descent, it means descent from common ancestry. This is kind of like the tree of life. Darwin in his book, kind of drew stuff that looks like this. I don't have a writing utensil, and I couldn't figure out how to mirror my iPad, so you'll have to excuse my hand drawing with a mouse. But this is like, and it branches, and so, but everything comes from the same place, and so that's common descent. And so life shares characteristics. We share similar chemical components. You're made of stardust, according to many evolutionary sciences. Interactions maintain homeostasis. Homeostasis is maintaining a stable internal environment. That's a huge theme in biology. Such a big theme it is that every single death is due to a loss of homeostasis. We have a genetic code, DNA and RNA. We convert biological molecules into new ones. We take what we eat, break it down, and then assimilate it into tissues and enzymes and various things that we need. We extract energy. Those calories that you see sometimes on food labels, we are extracting that energy. We're taking that energy, extracting it through cellular respiration to make ATP. I would definitely write ATP right here. We're going to dive into that a lot more down the road, but ATP, adenosine triphosphate. We replicate similarly. Living things do replicate in similar fashions. We have genes and we evolve. And so life, according to evolutionary scientists, 4.5 billion years ago, Earth formed. It took a long time for the earliest life to come about. And so, Homo sapiens, we came the last 5 minutes, if this is like a kind of an image from another textbook, but in the grand scheme of evolutionary timeline, rise of the mammals as in the last day, first hominids, which is human-like creatures, we're the last 5 minutes of the day. Is this accurate? Is this accurate biblically? We will discuss that down the road. But just right now, just know that evolution takes a long time to happen. And so before we left, Miller and Urey, they basically set up an experiment to show that molecules could be built from like this primordial soup with lightning. However, it's not a perfect representation because it's intelligent design. I don't know if you realize that or not, but in an experiment, you have intelligent designers setting it up. And so it's an interesting debate to have, like, well, yeah, it shows that living things can arise from the materials, but the experiment itself was set up in an intelligent way. This wasn't random chaos. And so they had a design, they had a purpose, they had a procedure. Nucleic acids, DNA. So cell membranes arose. Of course, you can't maintain homeostasis if you do not have a cell membrane. So for 2 billion years, organisms were unicellular prokaryotes, which means without a nucleus. And so most lived in the ocean due to no O3 layer, because O3 layers give protection against UV light. UV would have killed, that it's a toxic, very toxic environment. And so photosynthesis eventually arose through evolution. Again, this is according to evolution. And so which one is more efficient, aerobic or anaerobic? Well, which one makes the most energy? And hopefully you can see that aerobic makes more energy. Aerobic respiration. So you can jog a lot longer than you can sprint, because you can convert energy to ATP energy more efficiently with higher numbers with aerobic respiration when you're breathing. Eukaryotes through endosymbiosis. We'll talk a little bit more about that in evolution, but basically mitochondria and chloroplasts arose through endosymbiosis, which basically means this ancient prokaryote engulfed heterotrophic prokaryote, and instead of killing it, it's like, oh wait, you're making ATP, let me not kill you. Let me not break you down. Let me actually keep you inside. And so that's the best guess evolutionary theory has on the evolution of mitochondria and chloroplasts. And then, of course, cell specialization. So photosynthesis, of course, is taking sunlight and transforming it into chemical bond energy. And so this O2, it was a byproduct. Of course, that's great for us because we breathe oxygen. But it started to accumulate in the atmosphere, and through billions, of years, it changed the atmosphere. So some of the first photosynthetic organisms, cyanobacteria, astrolomites, so O2 was poisonous, so therefore organisms that could tolerate O2 evolved aerobic metabolism, which is very efficient compared to anaerobic, which we'll talk more about down the road. And so O2 also provide a layer of protection from UV light, called O3 or ozone. I'm sure you've heard about the ozone layer, depleting and kind of, chlorofluorocarbons destroying it and stuff. Global warming, we'll talk about some of that in ecology, hopefully, if we get to it. And so these cells evolved organelles, which are tiny organs, and this is where specialization occurs. And where specialization occurs, you get more complicated life. You get more detailed life, and life that's able to do and respond in various magnificent ways. And so some organelles may have originated in endosymbiosis. So I would love for you to be able to look that up, endosymbiotic theory. But basically mitochondria, chloroplasts, they were engulfed according to this theory, and instead of being destroyed, those ancient prokaryotes kept them, and they kept them instead of breaking them down. So this led to, and this is a very big theme in biology, cellular specialization. I don't know what kind of sports you play. I'm still getting to know you, which is great. But, when you're young, you kind of play all the positions, right? In baseball, my sport was baseball. You pitched, you caught, you played all the different positions. The pitchers are usually the best hitters. But as you progress onward, you become more specialized. You start focusing on either pitching or hitting, especially, in pros. In college, you're still kind of doing both, but in the pros, you usually specialize unless you're Shohei Ohtani. But nonetheless, specialization allows more functionality to happen. This allows, to become larger and adapt to specific environments, these multicellular organisms. So for evolution to take place, what must take place for evolution to happen? And there's a lot of answers that can go here, but basically you have to gain information. And I'm going to try to write this. I know this is horrible. I really need a writing utensil, a pad. That's a good A. Formation, information. But yeah, it's seriously, you have to So the tiniest living organism way back had hundreds of base pairs. You have billions. And so you have to gain information. And that information is not just random chunks of pieces thrown together. It actually has to mean something. It has to build proteins. It has to build enzymes. And so this is the best mechanism for evolution is Charles Darwin's natural selection. And so basically natural selection is, there's two big themes, two big statements right here that you should write down. But basically there's a struggle for survival. So it's hard to live. I think we've all realized that, especially these past couple of years, but it's hard to live. And then there's a survival of the fittest. Now, fittest doesn't mean you're the strongest or, you can run the fastest mile, although that probably helps. But in life, fittest could mean, your camouflage. Fittest can mean you regulate your temperature better. Fittest means, you make a certain enzyme that others don't. And so you have an advantage because you can eat a certain type of food that the others can't, such as like milk. Lactose and milk was an evolutionary adaptation for human beings. Those who raised cows thousands of years ago, some of them developed the trait of being able to ingest lactose, which was an advantage because you could eat, drink the milk, and then you could have that food source right there instead of getting really sick, bloated, that people who can't drink milk do. So basically, those are the two statements: struggle for survival and survival of the fittest. So individuals with the favorable traits, again, genetically, produce the greatest number of offspring because they are more likely to survive and reproduce. And so these traits become more frequent. That's evolution. When traits are changing in a population, that's evolution. We'll talk about the Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium and various things like that. So mutations fuel natural selection. And so here's an example. Let me get off the screen here. Okay, so some plants in a population exhibit variation in leaf structure. So it's like hairy, maybe sticky, and deer's like, nah, no thanks. Over time, though, if that increases the survival rate, right? This increases the survival rate, then that form of plant will become more prevalent. And so this is evolution. You might be like, well, it's still a plant. Yes, but evolution is not defined as that. Evolution is defined as the change of allele frequencies in a population over time. And so that is evolution. One other thing that we'll talk about, we can determine evolutionary relationships by comparing genomes. Genomes are, we've sequenced so many genomes. Genomes is the entire information of DNA in an organism. So genome sequencing have added molecular evidence to knowledge from the fossil record. So phylogenetic trees is this image, this diagram that shows evolutionary relationships. And so you will need to be able to read these types of phylogenetic trees. But here's a really large one, very, very basic one. But so life starts way back here, right? And so time goes this way. And so you can see endosymbiotic bacteria engulf mitochondria, and symbiotic bacteria engulf chloroplasts. After mitochondria, that's the endosymbiotic theory. You have three big domains of life. You have bacteria, archaea, and eukarya. Eukarya means have a nucleus. And so all of these, you can see so many different protists, right? But this is a phylogenetic tree. So back here, there's a common ancestor, and back here, there's a common ancestor to all life. And so this is common descent. And so what would be the first, what would the first cell's four characteristics be? So the first cell, what would it have?